All right, page 174, the Physio-Kundalini Syndrome. Until now, we have dealt with just a garden variety of stress relief. In this chapter, I would like to acquaint the reader with a specific problem that, again, is connected with the accelerated evolution of the nervous system. As has been mentioned before, the human nervous system has a tremendous latent capacity for evolution. This evolution can be accelerated either by meditative techniques or it may occur spontaneously in an unsuspecting individual. In both cases, a sequence of events is triggered, causing sometimes strong and unusual bodily reactions and unusual physiological states. Some of those people who meditate may suspect that these reactions are somehow connected with meditation. Others, however, who develop these symptoms spontaneously may panic and seek medical advice. Sometimes individuals of both groups may seek medical advice. Unfortunately, however, Western medicine is presently not equipped to handle these problems. Strangely, in spite of the intensity of the symptoms, little or no physical pathology can be found. Most of the mild cases are dismissed as psychosomatic symptoms, while in severe cases, either drastic radiological tests are undertaken or possibly exploratory surgery attempted. The sequence of bodily symptoms usually start at the left foot or toes, either as a mild tingling stimulus or as cramps. The stimulus continues up the left leg to the hip. In extreme cases, there is a paralysis of the foot and of the whole leg. Loss of sensation in large areas of the skin of the leg may occur. From the hip, the stimulus moves up the spine to the head. Here, sometimes severe headaches, pressure-like, may develop. In case of prolonged and severe pressures in the head, degeneration of the optical nerve may set in with accompanying visual impairment. Loss of memory and general disorientation, may occur. The physiological symptoms tend to mimic schizophrenia. It is very likely, therefore, that such individuals may be diagnosed as schizophrenics and be either institutionalized or given very drastic and unwarranted treatment. It is ironic that persons in whom the evolutionary processes of nature have begun to operate more rapidly and who can be considered as advanced mutants of the human race are institutionalized as subnormal by their normal peers. I dare to guess, on the basis of discussions with my psychiatrist friends, that this process is not as exotic and rare as one would like to believe, and possibly 20 to 30% of all institutionalized schizophrenics belong to this category. A tremendous waste of human potential. It is my hope that as the material presented here gradually reaches the more open-minded physicians and psychotherapists, and as the syndrome described becomes more widely known, non-traumatic methods of dealing with these symptoms will be developed, methods that will not stop but slow down and control the rate at which the evolutionary process is progressing, thus allowing the patients to develop at a safe, acceptable rate and to function normally in everyday environment. What is this mysterious Kundalini? All the preceding descriptions make meditation or just plain living appear to be a very dangerous affair. Anyone can be hit out of the blue by mysterious symptoms which Western medicine does not know how to handle. Let me assure you that just a very small percentage of people is so affected, and this also has its compensations. These symptoms are, after all, the correlates of spiritual development. It would, therefore, be wise for us to look into the literature dealing with such matters and see whether we could find descriptions of similar things happening in other cultures at other times. The Kundalini, as described in yoga literature, is said to be an energy coiled up like a serpent at the base of the spine. When this energy is awakened, it enters the spine, rises up along it, and is seen or perceived as a luminous serpent by the person having the experience. Once it has risen into the head, the luminous rod hopefully pierces the top of the head. That is, the rod-like energy beam is seen as projecting through the skull, pointing upward. When this happens, the person is said to be illuminated. Eventually, such a person may become highly intuitive and develop some psychic powers, such as clairvoyance, clairaudience, or healing abilities. Whether he develops these or not depends on many factors. However, Sometimes illumination may be late in coming, and all the person may be able to show for his efforts is a king-size headache, which may last for years. The books on yoga also show several points in the body, 7 in number. These are the so-called chakras or energy centers. These centers are to be verified or energized by the rising Kundalini energy. When this happens, the centers become receptors and distributors of inflowing cosmic energy for the body. These chakras are located near major nerve plexuses and coincide more or less with the glands of our endocrine system. When these centers are energized, they affect the endocrine glands and through them our behavior and physical functioning. All this makes absolutely no sense from the point of view of Western psychology or medicine. However, the trouble with the just described Kundalini is that it works whether we like it or not. As the symptoms our Western people are having correspond with the symptoms induced by the exotic, unbelievable Kundalini. In a way, this is similar to the acupuncture situation. The exotic acupuncture has proved itself in this country. It works, although Western science is still at a loss to describe how it works. The fault naturally does not lie with acupuncture, but with our models of reality. That is, we are unable to look at the system in a way that would make sense to us because our angle of view is too narrow. Therefore, what we urgently need are models that would allow us to view these queer workings of the Kundalini and acupuncture in terms that would make sense to us. This is what I shall attempt to do in the pages that follow. Now, wait a second. All right, I'll read a little bit of it. Progressive sensory motor cortex syndrome. This long title is used to describe the syndrome that seems to correspond well to the observed experiences of persons who have undergone the previously described sequence of symptoms, thus putting the esoteric Kundalini into terms of Western physiology. Having a background in biomedical engineering, I have tried to measure the changes induced by altered states of consciousness on the physiological states of the body. The results of some of these measurements have been given in chapters 1 and 2, in which it is shown how the heart aorta system goes into resonance and how it entrains the body to move in a rhythmic harmonic motion. A rather technical description of the physiological model developed by me to explain the Kundalini mechanism appears in the book by Lee Sanella, MD, titled Kundalini Psychosis or Transcendence. Here again, I have to repeat my admonition. A model is only a model and describes only the mechanical, physiological portion of the Kundalini syndrome. The Kundalini is a much larger concept in which planetary and spiritual forces come into play. However, even this limited model, as shown in my paper, is already a useful tool because it puts at the disposal of the medical profession a reasonable working concept of a syndrome that until now has not been described at all. The model describes a sequence of symptoms that allows the interviewing physician to compare the symptoms described by the patient. If the past pattern of symptoms fits the model, then the future symptoms are fairly predictable. The paper in Sanella's book is just a preliminary progress report. Much more work needs to be done to confirm some of the assumptions made in the paper. Kundalini, the ultimate stress release mechanism. This model, which we may call the physio-Kundalini, since it deals only with the physiological part of the Kundalini, describes the Kundalini as a stimulus spreading along the sensory cortex of the two hemispheres, starting from the bottom of the cleft between the two hemispheres of the brain. The layout of points on the sensory or motor cortices corresponds to points in the body, so that when a point on the cortex representing, for example, the knee is electrically or mechanically stimulated, the person feels the stimulus in his knee. He has no way of knowing that the stimulus is caused by his brain being artificially stimulated. This sequence of points on the cortex is called homonucleus, or the little man. For if one draws a picture of the parts of the body to which the points in the cortex are connected, a distorted human form results. Figure A. Both the sensory and motor cortices have approximately the same layout of these points. I'm trying to show that the layout of points on both the sensory and the motor cortices corresponds closely to the path the Kundalini takes in the body. This path is described in esoteric literature. See Appendix Bibliography 1-4. 3 actual recent case histories are given at the end of this chapter. To cause such a stimulus to move along the cortex, acoustical standing waves in the cerebral ventricles are postulated. These standing waves are triggered by the heart sounds, and they cause vibrations in the walls of the ventricles. The ventricles are fluid-filled cavities in the brain. Figure B shows the position of the third and lateral ventricles, stippled areas, and the strips of tissue hatched that make up the sensory and motor cortices of the brain. Figure A represents a cross-section of the brain along line AB of Figure B. The vibrations that arise in the ventricles are conducted to the gray matter of the cortex, which lines the fissure between the 2 hemispheres. Figure A. These vibrations will stimulate and eventually polarize the cortex in such a way that it will tend to conduct a signal along the homonucleus, starting from the toes and up. This is shown in Figure A by a line of arrows forming a closed loop. This behavior is in contrast to the way the brain normally handles a signal, which is shown by the 2 lines, one ascending to the cortex and one descending from it. The normal signal leads into the cortex at right angles to it. The states of bliss described by those whose Kundalini symptoms have completed the full loop along the hemispheres may be explained as a full stimulation of the pleasure centers in the brain caused by the circulation of a current along the sensory cortex. Figure A shows pleasure centers located in the path of the current loop in both hemispheres, just below the toes of the homonucleus. When body motion develops due to the action of the circulating stimulus current, we have to assume that there is crosstalk between the sensory cortex and the neighboring motor cortex. Figure B. That most of the described symptoms start on the left side of the body means that it is mostly a development occurring in the right hemisphere. This stands to reason because we are using our reasoning, rational, logical, linearly thinking left hemisphere all the time, while meditation tends to stimulate the nonverbal, feeling, intuitive right hemisphere. My model also suggests that the spontaneous cases of Kundalini may be attributed, among other things, to periodic exposure to certain mechanical and acoustical vibrations in our normal environment, which will cause the sequence of symptoms to arise. This has been shown by a biofeedback technique utilizing a pulsating magnetic field around the head. When people are exposed to frequencies of about 4 or 7 hertz for prolonged periods of time, as may happen simply by repeatedly riding in a car whose suspension and seat combination produce that range of vibration, or being exposed for long periods of time to these frequencies caused, for instance, by an air conditioning duct. The cumulative effect of these vibrations may be able to trigger a spontaneous physio-kundalini sequence in susceptible people who have a particularly sensitive nervous system. I would like to emphasize that when a person is healthy, relaxed, and generally free from psychological stress, these symptoms go unnoticed. Only when the unfolding Kundalini reaches areas of stress in the body do the symptoms become troublesome. The symptoms will persist until the stresses in that particular area of the body are released. This will then usually appear as localized pain. When that happens, the Kundalini moves on until it reaches the next spot of stress in its path. The severity of symptoms is always proportional to the degree of stress encountered. When the Kundalini has run its course, the body is basically free of deep-seated stresses, and since the body is reflected in the cortex, we may say that the brain is also relieved of stresses. Thus, the Kundalini is a great stress-relieving system. It will not allow the further accumulation of stress in the body. Once the full circuit is operating smoothly, stresses will be eliminated from the system as rapidly as they build up, so that no permanent accumulation of stress is possible. It is interesting to note that in some types of epilepsy, there is also a sequence of symptoms, sometimes called the march of epilepsy. Here, the sequence runs in the opposite direction from that of Kundalini. In an epileptic, the lip area may be affected first, then the face. Eventually, the symptoms spread down the neck, through the shoulders, into the arms, and eventually to the legs. The Kundalini would seem, therefore, to be a natural antidote to certain types of epilepsy. Meditation would thus be a reasonable treatment for this disease. And I'm going to stop there today.